What's going on, guys? It's Logan from Angle on Sports here. It's been a little while. I've been really busy with uni and work and everything, but I wanted to take a different approach today. We normally do talk about the NBA, but today we're going to be talking about the AFL and more specifically the North Melbourne Kangaroos. Now, they're my favourite team. I've barracked for them for essentially all of my life. Um, and we're in a really tough position at the moment. I just really wanted to go through and talk about and really recap for those of you who don't know really the history of our rebuild, whereabouts we are at the moment, and some things that we can do in the future. Realistically, the entire rebuild started back in 2016, where the North Melbourne leadership group and list managers decided that they were going to delist club legends like Boomer Harvey, Robbie Nahas, Daniel Wells, Drew Petrie, but also other legends of the game like Nick Del Santo, who played countless games for the St Kilda. This left our leadership especially our young players like Nick Larkey, Zerha, Sherry, LDU. They were all there around that time. It really left them with no leadership, especially they left Andrew Swallow alone, who was until that season also our club captain, who he actually retired the year after in 2017, and it just really left North Melbourne with absolutely no leadership whatsoever. By the 2018 season, North Melbourne was only left with two players who had ever made an All Australian team at that point. Those two players were Todd Goldstein, who made it in 2015, and Scott Thompson, who I'm pretty sure made it in 2013, along with his best and fairest. But unfortunately, Scott Thompson only lasted two more seasons, while Todd Goldstein left in 23. The North Melbourne Kangaroos also had the least experienced team and the second youngest list in the AFL. Despite all of this, North Melbourne still finished with 48 points on the Premiership ladder and only finished ninth, a game behind 8th place. But you could tell along the list and the coaching, everything, management, that there was some real problems starting to brew with this franchise, and there were going to be something that needed to be addressed quickly, or it was all going to fall apart. And fall apart it did. In 2018, the Roos drafted Taron Thomas, Bailey Scott, and Curtis Taylor. Now, Taron Thomas, notoriously, he was quite a great midfielder for the North Melbourne Kangaroos, but he had some off-field issues, which ended up getting him delisted. Curtis Taylor, I think 2 years ago, also got delisted, and the only person from this draft still on the list is Bailey Scott, who really doesn't get a lot of minutes. He's mainly a VFL player at the moment. And 2019 wasn't much better, drafting Jack Marnie and Flynn Perez, but there was one extra name there who took some time to develop, but has been a real staple in the 2026 North Melbourne Kangaroos list, and that one was Charlie Comben. Now, Charlie Comben, he's really taken off over the last 2 years, but he is the Kangaroos' main intercept defender, plays a lot off halfback, and is pretty much the anchor for North Melbourne's defense, especially with it's really rough around the edges. Having Charlie Comben there to really hold everything down, it's been working really well. It's here in 2019 where the higher ups at North Melbourne really decide that it's time to let go of Brad Scott. And that's where they replaced him with Rhys Shaw, who only lasted 2 seasons. Then we move on to 2020, where the Kangaroos drafted Tom Powell, Will Phillips, and also Eddie Ford. And once again, just like 2018, only one of these players is actually on our list. Tom Powell is well and truly within the best 23 for the North Melbourne Kangaroos at the moment, playing crucial midfield minutes and getting a lot of centre bounce attendances. But here's where things start to get turbulent, but we can see that we're on the right track, right? COVID hits, and so does officially the bright side of the rebuild. The 2021 draft came around, and the North Melbourne Kangaroos had quite a couple of picks, three of which ended up becoming. One of them was the first pick of the draft, and that was Jason Horne-Francis. We'll get to that very shortly, but the other two picks were Paul Curtis, who's been a prolific goalscorer and an absolute incredible forward for us recently, and also Jackson Archer, who's a great halfback. Paul Curtis, since he was drafted, has been showing flashes of greatness, insane kicks, insane goals, but it wasn't until the last 2 years where he's really started to take off and show that he is going to be a leader within the forward line. He's been kicking a lot of goals. I think he ended up being second in North Melbourne's leading goal kickers last year in 2025. But also Jackson Archer, who's really shown some of his dad's grit and grind in the back line. He's really great for defensive to midfield connection, but also defensive pressure. Jason Horne-Francis, on the other hand, at the end of the 2022 season, did request a trade to Port Adelaide. And as much as North Melbourne fans really hate on Jason Horne-Francis, as evident from their game round one against Port Adelaide this year, we came off better than we would have been with Jason Horne-Francis, right? The result of the Jason Horne-Francis trade was pick 2 and pick 3 in the 2022 AFL draft. Those two picks ended up being Harry Sheezel and George Wardlaw. Within that same off-season, North Melbourne also acquired Griffin Logue from Fremantle via the AFL assistant package. Griffin Logue, up until 2026, hasn't accounted to much for the football club. However, the defensive scheme has recently changed, and I've been seeing glimpses. I can't say I have been seeing glimpses, but round one was a really great game for Griffin Logue. There was some butchering of the kicking the ball, but defensive pressure, everything that you'd want out of the defense is great, especially if he can get the ball to one of our connecting halfbacks. The year is 2023, and North Melbourne sees the departure of one of their spine, one of their key backs in Ben Mackay. Now, by the end of the season, a lot of North Melbourne fans did want Ben Mackay gone, and it really worked out in their favour because they sent him to Essendon, where he really hasn't been playing well, and then ended up getting pick 3 for compensation. Now, this left North Melbourne with pick 2 and pick 3 in the national draft. This left North Melbourne with Colby McKercher and Zane Dersma. Colby McKercher has been great through the midfield. He's extremely flashy, he's extremely quick, and you can see a lot of comparisons between him and Boomer Harvey. Zane Dersma is yet to account to a lot, but he has a lot of raw talent and athleticism, and he could be a star for the right team, albeit he's probably the worst of the three Dersma brothers. That year via the draft, North Melbourne also acquired Riley Hardiman, Taylor Goad, and Will Dawson. North Melbourne also managed to acquire Dylan Stevens via trade, a former top 5 pick, and Toby Pink as a delisted free agent from the Sydney Swans. The year is 2024, and North Melbourne is able to acquire 4 really young guns via the draft. Those players are Finn O'Sullivan, Luke Urquhart, Matt Whitlock, and Cooper Trembeth, albeit Cooper being from the mid-season draft. North Melbourne were also able to acquire Jack Darling, Caleb Daniel, Luke Parker, and Jacob Constanti, all via trade, because we needed some leadership in this team. Otherwise, there was really not going to be anyone to hold the fort together when stuff went wrong. But that's really just a recap of everything that North Melbourne did through the trade and through free agency. But where were the real problems embedded in this franchise, in this sports team, in whatever you want to call North Melbourne? Because realistically, over the last 10 years, all I can say that they have been is a disappointment. As you probably know already, or you might have picked up on, all of these picks that North Melbourne had from 2020 all the way up until the current year were all at least top 5 picks. It really shows some lack of heart, lack of strength within the list. And that comes down to, as mentioned right at the start of the video, the lack of leadership that North Melbourne was left with after the delisting of Boomer Harvey, Drew Petrie, Andrew Sawala's retirement. There was really not a lot apart from Todd Goldstein, Jack Zeeble, Ben Cunnington, who are also all club legends, but there wasn't a lot really holding the club together apart from that. Along with a lack of leadership, going hand in hand, there was also lack of a real senior coach. Once North Melbourne decided to get rid of Brad Scott, they bounced around from coach to coach, having Reece Shaw and David Noble, before finally landing on Alistair Clarkson in 2023. Now, Clarko himself had a couple of issues leading into his first season at North Melbourne. Within his first off-season, he really had to mesh with all of the boys, but also start to teach them how to play a real game of football. Right in the middle of the season is where Clarko really got stuck in all of the Hawthorn racism stuff. This resulted in Clarko having to step away from the club, not only for mental health issues, but to also aid the AFL in their investigation around these racial allegations. This left Brett Ratton at the helm of North Melbourne for about 5 to 6 rounds, maybe longer. I really can't remember at this rate. It really goes to show that North Melbourne's coaching staff really was cursed at this time of the year. Not the year, but from 2010 until right now, 2026, as I'm recording this video, North Melbourne really didn't have a great coach until Clarko. Brad Scott has been outshone by his brother for a long time, not because of list, but also just because Chris is a lot better at coaching a team than Brad is. Alistair Clarkson is a proven coach who got really stuck in the middle of a lot of crap and now is really trying to get through to the boys. And we've seen that in round 1 against Port Adelaide. Round 1 against Port Adelaide was being touted by some as one of the most important games in North Melbourne's history, at least recently, since maybe like this decade, I guess. The game was to really show all of the fans and the league that North Melbourne are back. 6 years is enough. It was 6 years of youth development, and by now, it is really time to start showing teams what they are. North Melbourne have one of the best midfield futures, I guess. Maybe not at the moment, but midfield futures in the competition. They have great offensive skill. They lack a little bit of defense, but under Clarko, they can absolutely get that right. Especially through drafting players like Finn O'Sullivan, who you saw tag Zach Butters in round 1. There is a lot to like about the North Melbourne midfield coming in 3 years or so. It's going to be the best midfield in the comp. They also have quite a serviceable forward line with their captain Nick Larkey, with Cam Zerha, Paul Curtis, the new draftee, Lockie Doverston as well. For the last 3 years, North Melbourne, you've seen just boot it into the forward 50 and it not go anywhere. They were all ground balls, they were inaccurate kicks. Nick Larkey wasn't getting the right leads. It just wasn't working for the football club. You're now starting to see differences in that, which is something that we didn't see in round 2 against West Coast. Round 2 against West Coast was really just what brought North Melbourne back down to earth. North Melbourne, after their round 1 win by 42 points against Port Adelaide, were riding such a high, they thought the club was back. And they go to Perth and they get absolutely, I'm going to say, manhandled by West Coast Eagles. All of the North Melbourne players were playing their play style where they are going to be outside the stoppage, waiting for the handball to get a really fast run down into the forward 50. But there was no effort in getting the ball out of the stoppage. You'd get into the rucks, into the ball ups, throw-ins, everything like that, and you'd have Matt Flynn versus Tristan Sherry, which is a great matchup for Sherry, regardless of the brand new ruck rules. But there was not a single North Melbourne player within that stoppage waiting to get the ball. And that is one of the biggest problems with North Melbourne at the moment. If they're not getting the ball out of the stoppage in the midfield, then they have absolutely nothing to play with. When these things happen against North Melbourne, it's like the opposition has their own ball to play with and North Melbourne are just running around playing lacrosse. Because the way that North Melbourne, like I already said, they play out of stoppage. And they have a really fast offensive midfield, but they don't have the defensive midfield to stop. And now it gets to the defense, where I'm really starting to like what I'm seeing out of the players like Griffin Logue. Luke Parker's been moved into the back line, and that was a great move to show some real experience and some grit within the back line that isn't Caleb Daniel. I'm seeing a lot of stuff I like about Griffin Logue at the moment, especially round 1. Round 2 was quite unfortunate, and he's going to be out for a couple of weeks now. But we get to see the likes of Will Dawson maybe come back into the side. I'd love to see Blake Threadgold as soon as he gets healthy again. Toby Pink, I love him to death. He's my favourite ranger in the world. I know a lot of the boys at North Melbourne Closer to a Flag, Josh from further north, we all love him. He's a great guy. But he's not fitting at the moment. And I'd love to see a lot more pressure out of him just to really find his spot in the team. But I do think that once the young guys do start to come through, I don't think that there's much of a spot in our defensive six for him. But come the year 2027, what are we going to see out of North Melbourne out of the off season? A lot of people do have North Melbourne really saying about 9 to 10 wins this year, and I'd absolutely love to see that happen. And hopefully that's enough to bring in some free agents, a couple of people asking to come back to Victoria and to play for a side where they're going to get minutes. And that leaves me with a couple of free agents, but also a couple of people who might want to ask out again. The first player is Jordan Butts from Adelaide. And Jordan has been playing extremely well this year, and I really think that he's not going to ask back out of Adelaide. Um, but there is a high chance also that he might just want to go. He might want to find a new club if he wants to come to North Melbourne. I bet North will be welcoming him with open arms. Another player with a bit more experience would be Mitch McGovern. Coming into the back line, lots of experience. Replace Toby Pink, replace Luke McDonald, who's about to leave the team, or at least get dropped, put into the VFL. There's also Nick Vlosten from Richmond, who we've seen is a really great defender who could fit incredibly well with this North Melbourne squad. Buku Karmas was trying to leave the Western Bulldogs and try and find his way into Carlton. Maybe we could weasel Buku out of the Western Bulldogs. There's also potential to reopen the door to Leek Alir from the GWS Giants. I think if anything is going to change for this North Melbourne side within the next year or two, it is definitely going to be their backline, because off the wing they've already got, like, Dylan Stevens is really starting to show why he was a top 5 pick, but they also have Harry Sheasel, George Wardlaw, Finn O'Sullivan, Colby McKercher to really run their midfield, along with Tristan Sherry and maybe even Taylor Goad, if something comes of that. Their forward line also, they already have their captain in Nick Larkey. They have a young and progressing Paul Curtis. They've got the ball Cam Zerha. They've got Lockie Doverston, who is obviously going to progress as time goes on. Cooper Trembeth as well, like, he's an absolute. He kicked 3 goals in his first 4 AFL games, which is unheard of. So yeah, it's going to be the defense that really starts to shake up in this North Melbourne squad. And I really think that that is the next step to North Melbourne making the finals. But that's it about North Melbourne today. I've spoken a lot about their past, present, and a potential future for their backline. This weekend, about 7:30 on Saturday, they do have the Essendon Bombers at Marvel Stadium. I am going to be there. I am going to be absolutely cheering for my boys in blue. It's a must-win game for us, especially after losing to the West Coast Eagles last week. That was embarrassing. Essendon really don't look good, but if there's any game that they're going to really show up and win, it's probably going to be against us. I was there last year in our upset defeat, the one where I'm pretty sure it was Finbar Maley. He took too long to kick the ball. This season for North Melbourne has me quite worried, especially after last week. I do hold out a lot of hope for us. Like I said, I do think that North Melbourne do beat Essendon, but I thought that North Melbourne were going to beat West Coast, and it's a rough place to be in at the moment, just speaking from a personal experience, where we just really need to see a lot of improvement from this football club. Otherwise, we're really going to be lost. I remember back in 2018, maybe 2019, where me and all of the boys would just hang it on one of these guys from school that was a Carlton supporter, albeit he was one of our good mates, but we would absolutely lay into him because they hadn't won a game in a long time. I think they might have made it 12 weeks into the season without a win. And it's just the experience that I've had since really I started watching the AFL properly back in about 2020-ish. We have a bright future, and we have a great coach, we have great leadership, and we're starting to see it all come together. But it is a really crucial time in this club's future. We really need to turn it up now. This has been my angle on the ruse. I hope you enjoyed. I apologize that everything is taking so long to come out at the moment. I'm extremely busy. If you enjoyed, please leave a comment on your thoughts below, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Peace out.